graphing quadratic functions. So there are two common forms everyone should know. The first one is standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and vertex form, which is y equals a subtract h squared plus k. And these are important because vertex form, you need this form to graph quadratic functions. So if you have an equation in standard form, you would need to convert it using completing the square or the formula negative b divided by 2a equals x. You need to use this formula to convert it to vertex form. So here are some important information you guys should know about quadratic functions. If the variable a in vertex form is negative, then the parabola will open down like this. And then the y will be a maximum because that's the highest point it can go. And if the variable a is a positive, then it will open up like this. And then the lowest point would be a minimum. So before we start graphing or doing mapping notations, you guys should understand some key components of this equation. And that is the positive 8, the positive 2, the 3, and the negative. So let's start with the 3. The 3 is actually at the spot where A is, and this A represents the stretch, and it's a vertical stretch. So what you guys have to write for transformation is that 3 is a vertical stretch. So the parabola will have to have a vertical stretch of 3. Having the word vertical is key because you have to know that this is a vertical stretch, but just not a stretch, because there's actually a horizontal stretch later on. So make sure you write vertical stretch. And so the second one is the shift, which is this one here. And the shift is, it says positive 2 in the brackets, but when you take it out, it's actually negative because it's always the opposite of what it's in the bracket. So if it's positive 2 here, it's supposed to shift right, but when you take it out, it's negative 2, so you have to be shifting left. So you would have to write a horizontal shift of 2 to the left. Over here, it's the vertical shift because we have already passed the horizontal, and the horizontal is always in the bracket. Outside of the bracket is the vertical shift, and it's just what it is. So if it's positive, it's a positive. So you would write a vertical shift up by 8 units. The last thing we have to know is the negative. You don't put negative for the vertical stretch because it just have to be 3. And the negative here is actually represent the reflection of the parabola. So if it's a negative, you would have to write parabola will reflect on the y-axis. And when you're doing graphing quadratic functions, the reflect of the negative is always the y-axis. Okay, so now we're moving on to mapping notations. So the base graph of a quadratic function is y equals x squared. And these are all the base values of x, and these are all the base values of y. So you must make sure you guys memorize this because you guys will need to know these numbers to make any sort of functions. So over here, we're using the same function as we did as in this question. So what we did is we took all the base numbers of x and put it here, right here. And we took all the base numbers of y and put it here in the brackets. So what we did is that since when you take this out is a negative 2, you put x subtract negative 2, and this is a, you would have to times a with y, and you add 8. So what I did here is just multiply negative 3 with y and then add 8 and subtract negative 2 by x. So you would use all the base number and subtract negative 2 each time, and you get a number. And over here, for the y, you would times all the base number by negative 3 and add 8 to all of them. And here are all the coordinates in the end, the final results. And if you take the coordinate, the x coordinate and the y coordinate, and plot them on the graph, it should have a parabola. So this is what we're gonna do here. we start with -4 and -4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. -3 and +5. -2 and 8. -1 and 5. And finally 0 and -4. 0, and you go down -4. And when you connect the dots, you can see we have a parabola. And notice that since we have a negative here, as we covered on the top, if it's a negative, then the parabola will be facing down right here. So then the maximum for us will be this point right here, which is the y point, and whatever this is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The max is 8. So that's how you graph quadratic functions.